Well, welcome to Volume 2, Phillip McCordall again. Now this is, of course, about cameras, because that's what I promised you. Now, what's the most important thing we need to take a photograph? Photographs as we know them, as we're used to seeing. That's right, light. You thought I was going to say cameras. Anyway, it's light. Now, share up. Now, we've got three principal types of cameras. We've got, of course, the DSLR. We've got the little compact, which are great. We've got, of course, the telephone. Now, there are one or two other types of camera that I'll show you now. These are bridge cameras. Now, bridge camera is very similar to DSLR. They do the same thing, except you can't change the lens. So it's, if you like, it's between the compact and the DSLR. There are mirrorless cameras. Now, these are smaller than DSLR. They've got no mirror in it, as the name suggests, but don't think they're going to be cheaper. This Leica is about £5,000. There are many more, like the sports camera, the underwater camera, the pinhole camera, the large format camera, the medium format camera, and the panoramic camera. But we won't be talking about all those. There's also speed cameras, but we won't talk about those, that's for sure. Now, let's have a look at the first, the telephone. We'll go through them all. And the telephone is a problem. But it's only a problem because I find it slips out my hand. Why they've made it with shiny edges, I just can't understand. But anyway, they have. The biggest problem with it is not the quality. You can also work with manual. The biggest problem is not the quality, it's the fact that if the sun is out and it's shining on my face, then my face shows up in this because it reflects like crazy. I touch it, whoa, look at that. Oh, it's dirty. Reflects like crazy. If the sun is behind me, it goes straight on the screen and I can't see anything. What you really need is a viewfinder. You need a little thing you hold up to your eye. Working like this is very, very difficult. I should do a selfie. Anyway, that's the problem with telephones. What about a compact camera? Well, as it says, it is beautifully compact. It will fit in virtually any pocket. I carry one around with me all the time. Even when I've got this with me, strangely enough, I've always got this. It's great, the quality is wonderful. It's not cheap. We're talking about £500 or whatever that is dollars. I'll put it up on the screen. I'll put it up that side. Put it on that side on the screen. So that's about £500. Well, that's a lot of money, isn't it? I mean, that's the price of a DSLR. But anyway, it's great. You can't change the lens. You don't need to change the lens. You've got a wonderful zoom on it, up to 700mm. Now, if that doesn't mean anything to you, in the next lesson, we'll be talking about lenses, millimetres and f-stops. So, that I think is great. Very nice. And the quality, I'll show you the quality in a minute between the three of them. Now we go to a DSLR. Oh, by the way, the Lumix, or this type of camera, has the screen on the back and a viewfinder. So I can hold it up. Now that, I've got it switched off. That is incredibly useful because of the situation with the sun. Now not all of these have viewfinders. So if you want one, make sure you buy a compact with a viewfinder. If not, you've got the same problems on the telephone. So that's an interesting point. The DSLR. Now, why is it called a DSLR? A digital single lens reflex. Why single lens? No idea. Because you can take the lens off, so it's multiple lens if you like, but you have to buy different lenses. It's the bee's knees of cameras for the amateur or the pro that works on small format. Wonderful, it's got a mirror in it. Now here's the mirror, and you'll be able to see that it pops up and down as I take the picture, very fast. There we go. Now of course while it's up, that fraction of a second it's up, then that's when it exposes to the sensor that's in the back of the camera, it exposes the picture. So then that's fine. Now, I don't know if you noticed, well you wouldn't have had time to see it, would you? Let's have a look under the mirror. Well, we just lift the mirror, and it's done like that, and I don't know if you can see that. Ah, there it is. Now that little reflective plate is in fact the sensor. And that's when people talk, that's when people talk about size of sensors. Now this is a small sensor compared with the full frame sensor. Now what's a full frame sensor? Well, a full frame sensor is when you have a sensor that's the same size as 35mm film used to be. And of course that's a big help. This is about, well, it's over 3/4. It's a slightly, I think it's a 1.6 or size of a full frame sensor. So the advantage is buying a full frame sensor camera, but much more expensive. And you don't need one really if you're an amateur. As I am now. I retired 10 years ago. Well, for those who like drawings, I've done a quick one here, very rough. The light comes through, it's the yellow line, comes through, hits the mirror, goes straight up, round a pentaprism and comes out the visor, or the viewfinder. On the way, of course, the mirrors come up normally and it falls on the sensor, which is in red. Then the mirror comes down again. And that's about as technical as I get in these lessons. I like to keep them simple. So that's basically how a DSLR works. You can get, of course, zoom lenses for it, or prime lenses for it. Prime lens is one that has a fixed focal, but all that we could do in the next lesson. Very nice camera, very easy to use. I love it. Just going back to this one, it of course it is also can be fully automatic, fully focus, autofocus, everything you like, does exactly the same as the DSLR. And the telephone also can be automatic or manual. The only thing I think with the phone is I can't focus it by hand. Might be able to, but as I say, I don't use it for taking pictures, although I'm going to show you now a comparison between the three. Now this is a real snapshot type of comparison, so let's have a look. Full of colour, this is the DSLR, full of colour, very nice. Oh, that's a bit flat, that's the Lumix. A little lacking in colour. But don't forget, everything is set to the factory defaults at the moment, and the real tests come when you enlarge the images. And oh, telephone, that's all, look at those colours. Now that just shows that that's a very rough comparison, but we'll do more accurate tests later on in other lessons. Now a quick word about bridge cameras. Well, bridge cameras are exactly the same as a DSLR, except you can't change the lens. They have very good zooms. Quite often they won't shoot in RAW format. Now RAW format I'll have to explain in another lesson. But basically they're the same as a DSLR, a lot cheaper. But if you buy one, the lens has got, as I say, a good zoom, but you can't take a photograph in as low light as you can with a DSLR because the lens isn't quite the same quality. Well, I better have a quick word about RAW because if you want to rush out and buy a camera, you ought to know. Now, cameras like these two, the telephone doesn't do it, but like these two, record images or can record images in JPEG or RAW format. JPEG is like all the photographs that go around on the web. But what's the difference? Well, JPEG is a developed image. It's being developed by the camera. That means that some of the information is no longer there. If you've got whites that are very white and blacks that are very black, you'll have trouble recovering them with retouching. You're not retouching now, perhaps, but in the future, excuse me, in the future you might be doing. Now you have the possibility of shooting RAW, and RAW is an unprocessed image that comes out of the camera. You can also shoot both. You can set it up to shoot JPEG and RAW, so it gives you two files. If you can't retouch at the moment, put the RAW file away and get it out when you can retouch, because there's nothing worse than trying to retouch an image when you've only got 3/4 of the quality, if you like, or the information. So that's what RAW is. Now, what's a mirrorless camera? Well, that's very easy. It's obvious. It doesn't have a mirror. It has an electronic signal that comes up into the viewfinder or onto the screen on the back. Now, this is going to be the future, I'm absolutely certain, but I don't like them at the moment. I don't think the vision is as good as a DSLR, but I think we will be going eventually to mirrorless cameras completely. But on the other hand, we'll be going to cameras in our eyes apparently one day. Well, I hope that's helped you understand a little about cameras. Please don't ask me which one you've got to buy. I'll put that in a lesson. I'll tell you what, we'll do that after the lenses lesson, and I'll group them together and tell you then how to choose which camera you want. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe and like, and we've got a website called learnshots.com. You can upload photographs to it, it's free. You can upload photographs to it, that way you can show me what you do. Cheers, here's to the next lesson.